when Bob Emmons was talking about those three foundation stones for gratitude, joy, grace, and love, I was wondering, I had my own ideas, of course, listening, and I was wondering what you had in mind when you were listening about joy, for instance.
Well, two things that I think of. On one level, the instructions in the Buddhist training is to live in joy even amidst difficulty, to live in joy even when there is trouble or conflict, to find that sweet joy within yourself that allows you to be stable, present, centered, appreciative, because your depression or your worries and so forth doesn't actually contribute either to your well-being or, it turns out, to anyone else. But if you can bring your spirit of well-being even to difficulty, it changes things. And a good friend of ours, Wes Nisker, went to interview Gary Snyder recently. Gary Snyder, most of you know, 84 years old, kind of around the same age as you, yes? Is that right?
Yeah.
One of your brothers. Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, and a fantastically, visionary environmentalist from the 1950s and 60s, Earth Household and so forth. And he said, Gary, what do you say as an environmentalist now looking at global climate disruption, extinction of species, rising oceans, other kinds of political problems from this? What advice do you have to us looking over this 50 years of your work? And he responded, he said, don't feel guilty. He said, if you're going to save it because you love it. Not out of anger or not out of guilt and so forth. That doesn't contribute to the well-being of the heart and the spirit. The only force, really, that's capable of changing the world, equal perhaps to the force of violence and so forth, is the force of love and appreciation. So rather than directing the heart and mind toward guilt, don't feel guilty, save it because you love it, and let that spirit of love be that which invigorates you.
And that is not joy. Out of that grows
Out of that comes joy, exactly.
And somehow that joy doesn't depend on what happens, as you say. But the joy that doesn't depend on what happens is the joy that springs from gratefulness. Because we know people who could have joy, for they have everything that it would take, and they don't have joy. And other people have lots of trouble, and yet they are joyful. They're radiating joy. And when you look very closely what the difference is, it's the grateful ones who are joyful. And the ones who lack gratitude can have whatever else they may, and it still doesn't give them the joy that they should give.
I heard a story about a hospital chaplain who goes around the hospital once a year, especially down in the basement in the back rooms, to visit all the staff members, the people who clean the floors and the bathrooms and the people who wash the pots and so forth. And part of her work, or this ritual she does, is she goes and she blesses their hands for the work that they do. And so she'll go and find each person and hold their hands and offer a kind of a prayer and a blessing. And then they started to talk and write about it, and it turned out that for the whole year of their work and service in the hospital, to have somebody come and appreciate them and bless their hands for what they offer was the most meaningful thing that happened for many of them in the course of that year.
We have many hands to bless around here. The ones here, the electronic hands, and the ones that fixed our breakfast, and the ones who did a lot of work to bring this summit conference about. So that is a beautiful thought. And if I may go back to Bob Emmons' 3 points, the second one, grace, I thought that might be particularly difficult in it's not for me, because I know enough about Buddhism for this answer. But I think for many people it may be very difficult to see how grace fits into Buddhism because of their notion of grace. So many of us come from a Judeo-Christian background, and we have a notion of grace that might...
Well, what does grace mean to you?
When I was growing up, it was something that you got from God. It was sort of, God had all these different bottles of grace, and for different for different occasions you got sanctifying grace and helping grace, and it was like a little pharmacy. But but now, for me, grace is the grace of a dancer. That kind of a grace, the grace that springs from life, and it had my concept has only grown. It hasn't. I still accept everything that was there before, but the big images are different, because that great mystery that we call God, if you want to use that term, is life. Life is that tremendous mystery in which we are totally immersed and which is totally in us, and we can't say, do we have life or does life have us? That is that mystery which those who use the name God correctly call God. And out of this life springs grace. If you watch a cat or a panther and the grace of a panther, that's not something that's poured in. That's everything else is taken away that would hinder that free flow of life. And so I think of grace much more as taking away the impediments. A dancer, when she first starts out, she is a bit clumsy. But she doesn't add anything to become graceful. She loses the clumsiness, she loses the constantly thinking about what she's doing, and when she just lets life flow through her, then she's graceful. So I would think that is also what I have felt in Buddhism, that kind of grace.